What's up, warrior women of Christ, all my friends out there? How you doing? Okay, trying to get this thing fixed. Okay, so I came across an article last night on the internet that really just made me stop in my tracks, and just made my jaw drop. Um, and I'll go ahead and read you the title. This article is from Raw Story, which is a well-known, well-circulated news organization. And the title says, "An insider explains how rural Christian white America has a dark and terrifying underbelly." I was like, dark and terrifying underbelly? What does that even mean? So I read the article, and the further I got, I was just like floored. So I wanted to share this with you guys. I know a lot of Christians. Hey, Kimberly, how are you? Thank you for joining. I've heard a lot of Christians or people who call themselves Christians who may not really even be practicing. But I've heard a lot of people say that, persecution is not happening in this country, and that people that think that are just being ridiculous and paranoid. But it has been rising for a little while, ever since the Supreme Court ruling about gay marriage in 2015. It's really been rising a lot, steadily, and slowly and subtly. More and more people are jumping on that bandwagon, and it's very disturbing to see something like this in such a well-circulated internet news article. But I wanted to read you a few of the things that it says on here before I talk any more about that. But first, let me just tell you, I was curious. I was like, how many people actually even read the Raw Story? Is this just some kind of obscure Christian hating news organization, or is this something that a lot of people read? How much influence does this have? And I was surprised to find out it's actually very reputable. They have been featured in the New York Times, The Guardian, LA Weekly, the New York Post, the Rolling Stone, The Hill, and they have an average of 10.7 million readers per month. This is according to Wikipedia, and that was in 2015, so it may be even more now. 10 million viewers read this article that I'm about to read to you. And I'm just like, wow, I hope a lot of those people did not take this for what it says. But let me just read some of it to you. And I'll post the link later in the comments. So what they're basically, the reason they're writing this article is because they are equating Christians with Trump supporters. So the liberals obviously hate Trump, and they hate Trump supporters. So they kind of lump everyone who is a Christian in with Trump supporters, because that was basically the biggest group that elected Donald Trump was evangelicals. So they kind of blame it all on Christians for the fact that Donald Trump got elected. So in this article, he starts out saying, "As the election of Donald Trump is being sorted out, a common theme keeps cropping up from all sides. Democrats failed to understand white working class flyover America." And so that's what the reason he's writing this article, saying that, that the reason Trump got elected was because Democrats didn't understand white working class Christian Americans. So he basically goes on to say how he grew up in a rural Christian white family, and just talking about his experience there, which sounds to me like it was pretty much just superficial. He went to church some when he was younger, but I don't think he could have ever really known what it means to be a real Christian. But anyway, he says, "In deep red America, the white Christian God is king, figuratively and literally. Religious fundamentalism has shaped most of their belief systems. Systems built on a fundamentalist framework are not conducive to introspection, questioning, learning, or change." So, and then he says, when you have a belief system built on fundamentalism, it isn't open to outside criticism, especially by anyone not a member of your tribe and in a position of power. So right there, what he said in that sentence, systems built on a fundamentalist framework are not conducive to introspection, questioning, learning, or change. He's building the foundation for the rest of his article, in which he is basically lumping all Christians in together and calling us completely uneducated and unable to think for ourselves, unable to question what we're told, unable to question reality, unable to learn, and unable to just, basically unable to even have critical thought at all. That's really what he is saying about white Christians. And let me see. He goes on he says, the fundamentalists I grew up around aren't anti-education. They want their kids to know how to read and write. They're against any quality, in-depth, broad, specialized education, which, by the way, that is a contradiction. How can you have broad and specialized education? It's either broad or specialized. And he says that once it reaches the level where what you learn contradicts doctrine and fundamentalist arguments, it becomes dangerous. So this article, he's painting our Christian views and our Christian worldview as dangerous, okay? And that's just the beginning. I'm just kind of skimming through here to read some of the highlights to you real quick. I'm not going to read the whole article. So give me just 1 second here. Okay, here we go. Another problem with rural Christian white Americans is they are racists. We've all heard that one, haven't we? I'm not talking about white hood-wearing, cross-burning, lynching racists, though some are. I'm talking about people who deep down in their heart of hearts truly believe they are superior because they are white. Their white God made them in his image, and everyone else is a less than perfect. Okay, sorry about that. Open your hair. What do you mean open my hair? That may be a typo, I don't know. Sorry about that. My internet cut out for just a second. Okay, so he's calling all Christian white evangelicals racist. And let's see here. I'm going to read a few of the key things that he says in here. He says that we believe non-whites are the color they are because of their sins, or at least the sins of their ancestors. Blacks don't have dark skin because of where they lived and evolution. They have dark skin because they are cursed. God cursed them for a reason. If God cursed them, treating them as equals would be going against God's will. It is really easy to justify treating people differently if they are cursed by God and will never be as good as you no matter what they do because of some determined status. Once you have this view, it is easy to lower the outside group's standing and acceptable level of treatment. First of all, I have no idea where he's getting those views because I've been a Christian my entire life since I was 6 years old, and I've never believed any of that, and I've never known anyone who believed that. I've never known that, and I've known a few racists because I grew up in a very tiny little town out in the sticks, so I have known a few racists. But the majority of the people that I grew up around and all of the Christians that I knew were not racist. Did not look down on people because of the color of their skin, did not think that God thought less of those people because of the color of their skin. God made all of us, black, white, red, yellow, green, purple. He made all of us in his image because he made us as humans. And skin color is nothing more than just, the melanin in your skin that gives you the skin pigment. So what he's saying that Christians believe is not even true at all, but he's using his false claims there to paint all Christians as racist, all white American Christians. And then let me find some more of this stuff that he's saying here. If you just joined, this is from the Raw Story, which is a mainstream internet news publication. Let's see. Okay, here's another one. He says, because rural Christian white Americans will not listen to educated arguments supported by facts that go against their fundamentalist belief systems from outsiders, any change must come from within. So He's saying that no Christian white American is going to listen to any educated argument. So he's saying we're all uneducated, um, which is completely ridiculous. It's ridiculous to lump an entire group of people in together and say you're all uneducated. Every single white Christian American is uneducated. How ridiculous. I'm sorry, but that is ridiculous. Of course, not all Christian white Americans are uneducated. Yeah, there are some uneducated white Americans, just like there are uneducated brown Americans and black Americans and everything else in between. So you can't just lump all people by skin color and religion in together and say they all think this way, they're all racist, and they're all uneducated. No, I'm sorry. I'm educated. I have a master's degree, I have a bachelor's degree, and I graduated in the top of my class. Graduated with my master's degree with a 4.0 from one of the top universities in the country for the specialization that I was in, which is actually education. So, no, not all Christians are uneducated. I know lots and lots of well educated Christians. And, you know, if you walk into Princeton or anywhere like that, they actually have lots of doctors on staff who are actually, you know, extremely educated to the maximum, and those are in the seminary or whatever you call it. They are teaching other people about the Bible, about all the evidence for the Bible, about all the teachings of the Bible. They had to go all the way through school, all the way through college, all the way through their doctorate program, which was just as long as any other doctorate program. There's lots of doctors that are not even in that line of theology or anything like that. They're just in other career fields. There are people that are very well educated that are Christians. We are not all uneducated. And it's just frankly stupid to say something like that. Okay. But that's the claim that he's making here in this article. He says, okay, this is why they fear change so much. They aren't used. Yeah, I know, right? Kimberly said, wow, and that's exactly what I was thinking. He also says, they aren't used to it. Of course, it really doesn't matter whether they like it or not. Like evolution and climate change, even though they don't believe it, it is going to happen whether they believe in it or not. So one of the reasons why he's calling us all uneducated is that is because we don't just have the same beliefs. Everyone that is a Christian does not believe in evolution. I'm sure that some Christians do, and climate change. You know, some people that are Christian believe in those things. Some people that are Christian don't believe in those things. And I'm not going to get into that. But just because everyone doesn't believe in macroevolution like you do, does not mean that they are uneducated, because there's microevolution, which is you know, within a species. There is evolution that happens within a species as they adapt to their environment. Certain genes mutate, and that is how species adapt to their environment and survive. Okay. And then there's macroevolution, which is, you know, from one species to another. For example, you know, how they will say that we evolved from apes, but yet there's actually zero definitive proof that any species has ever evolved into another species. They just kind of assume that. There is lots of evolution or microevolution evidence. There's lots of evidence for that out there. But as far as the evidence for macroevolution from species to species, there's really no hard evidence for that. And actually, there's a lot more evidence against that, which you would be surprised to find out. But if you ever have taken a science class, even in like third grade science, you learned about the Precambrian explosion, which is our part of our what we have as our fossil record, which means the fossil record shows that basically all of these species just pretty much showed up at the same time. It wasn't like we have some fossils from this many million years ago, and then, you know, then that was the only thing there, and then millions of years later this other species came around. That's not what the fossil record shows. The fossil record actually shows all of these different species around the same time appearing in the fossil record. So science actually proves that macroevolution is not true. And they haven't figured out a way to really put those pieces together, but they just assume that since they believe in macroevolution, they just assume that there's some fossil out there somewhere that will someday prove the missing link. But there actually has never been a missing link proven. There is no missing link fossil anywhere that we've ever found. So you can't just assume things and then say that you are scientific, okay? Scientific, if you're going to think scientifically, you have to have evidence for that before you are going to just assume it. But these people just assume that they are correct without the proper evidence, and then they accuse us of being non-scientific. Sorry, but I don't think that's very scientific to just assume that your worldview is correct because you want to assume that it's correct, okay? Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm going on a rant there. I want to read a little more from this article. Another major problem with closed-off fundamentalist belief systems is they are very susceptible to propaganda. He's saying that we have no checks and balances, no way to guard against misinformation. He's saying we are completely closed off, and that we don't have, it says, without built-in protective functions like critical analysis, self-reflection, openness to counter evidence, and willingness to reevaluate any and all beliefs. Ironic, huh? Bad information in a closed-off system ends up doing massive damage in a short period of time. Okay, hypocrite much? Hypocrite? I don't know. It's pretty hypocritical to say that we, Christian people, are unable to self-reflect and critically analyze things, and that we are not open to counter evidence, and that we're not willing to reevaluate our beliefs. When that's precisely what I see from the writer of this article. He is completely closed off to the fact that maybe he could be wrong about climate change or evolution. Maybe he could be wrong. Just maybe. I'm just saying, since there's no scientific evidence to really back you up, you know, maybe you should be open to some other views. Just a thought. Oh gosh, it's just so ironic. It just makes me laugh. If someone is allowed into a closed-off system and their information is deemed acceptable, anything they say will be readily accepted and become gospel. Yeah, that's pretty much what I've seen happen on the liberal side of things. Let me fix this where I can read your comment. Okay, Kimberly, even with microevolution, is it even truly evolution or just simply mutation? Yeah, exactly. Microevolution suggests a betterment of a species. Surely not all microevolution is beneficial to the subject. Yeah, very good point. Evolution is a whole can of worms, and the people that believe in macroevolution, it's just like they are so dead set on that, and they've been told for so long that that is the scientific gospel, that they will not even entertain the idea that maybe the evidence is not all there. And I've been all the way through school. Like I said, I've learned all the evolution stuff in school. My biology 101 class in college, one of the first classes I ever had, I read all of their theories about all of this. They basically believe we came from pond scum. The pond scum somehow just became alive, and eventually the little, you know, single-celled organism somehow grew all these other cells and eventually grew legs and walked up onto land. And then that little organism somehow just, you know, mutated into everything that we see here. I'm sorry, it's just so ridiculous, and there is no proof for it. There is no proof of that. There's not. But when you try to tell anyone who is, you know, just married to this evolution gospel, they won't listen to anything, and they just automatically shut you out and say you're crazy. I'm not crazy. I am open to evidence. I am. If you can show me one single fossil that proves a missing link between one species evolving into a completely different species, then we can say macroevolution is true. However, there is not one single fossil that proves evolution from one species to another species. There's not one. Okay, so when you can show me that, then I'll say, okay, yeah, you're right, you know. But anyway, until then, maybe you shouldn't be so just dead set on yourself being right. Really what it all comes down to is they don't want to entertain the notion that maybe God is real. They don't want to believe that. So anyway, let me get back to the article. Sorry, ranting again. Rural Christian white Americans have let anti-intellectual, anti-science, bigoted racists like Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, blah blah blah, into their belief systems. So they're calling all of us anti-intellectual, anti-science, and bigoted racists. Okay, so this article is saying all Christians are anti-intellectual, which means we're just completely against knowing things, and we're anti-science. I love science, okay? I do love science. God created science. So people that say, you're either for science or the Bible, no, actually they go together because God created science, okay? You do not have to give up science to be a Christian. And you don't have to give up Christianity to like science and know science, okay? There is no conflict between the two. There is not. So anyway, let's see here. Gosh, I'm not going to read all of this. There's just so much on here. But when you keep reading this book, this article, he keeps going back to calling us the same names, and then talks about our Bible and says, when the 2,700-year-old book that was written by uneducated, pre-scientific people, subject to translation innumerable times and edited with political and economic pressures from popes and kings, is given higher intellectual authority than facts arrived at from a rigorous, self-critical, constantly re-evaluating system that can and does correct mistakes, no amount of understanding, respect, or evidence is going to change their minds and assuage their fears. Okay, there's so much wrong with that sentence. I've just got to address that. He says the Bible was written... he says it was written by uneducated, pre-scientific people. I want to say about the whole uneducated thing, you think the people that wrote the Bible were uneducated because they knew how to read and write in a time when most people didn't know how to read and write. So how does that work out? I'm just wondering. And he says that the Bible was subject to translation innumerable times. That's not true either. If you look at all of the manuscripts that we used to translate the Bible into what we have now, they all line up. They all match. There's not like one translation over here that says this and then it was translated into this other version that says something different. That's not the case at all. You can look at the oldest manuscripts that we have and the newest manuscripts that we have and see that they match almost 100%, like 99.99%. And the only changes are changes in things like spelling and little, tiny little things like that that don't change the meaning. So no, the Bible has not been translated innumerable times. And he says it was edited with political and economic pressures from popes and kings. Okay, I'm assuming he's talking about the King James Version right there. But the problem with that argument is that we have the manuscripts that they use to translate. I'm not sure if we have the exact ones that they translated the King James. I'm pretty sure we do though. And it's, my point is that those manuscripts that were used, have been retranslated into the way we speak today, which just means that they're not using thee and thou and shall and all that stuff. So it's not like whatever pressure he's talking about right there, he's saying that had some kind of influence on it, which, first of all, it didn't. And even if it did, we could go back and see now by looking at those manuscripts that they used to translate that. We can go back and see if there were any kind of changes like that, we could see them. But that's not the case. So in the newer translations, they go back and retranslate from those older manuscripts. They retranslate it into our way of speaking. So anyway, okay, let's see here. There's a couple more things I wanted to say about this real quick. Let me find it. He says deeply held beliefs are usually only altered or replaced under catastrophic circumstances that are personal. This belief system alteration works both ways. And you know what? That is true. People change their belief systems occasionally when they do come under really hard circumstances. And one thing that made me think of is something that's completely unrelated to what he was saying with that. But the way Christians in America are today, we're comfortable, we are spoiled, we're fat and happy. If you go to pretty much any church in America, it's pretty much like a social club. They got their little coffee shop going on. They have their social event where you can come and take your picture in front of the little, backdrop thing. And most of us are just completely clueless about what persecution would even look like. And most Christians in America today are just, they're not going to know what hit them when it really does kick in full speed. Because here's the thing about persecution, it doesn't happen just overnight. All of a sudden one day they're putting you to death. The Jews during the Holocaust, it wasn't like everything was perfect and hunky-dory and then the next day they were loading them up and putting them on trains. And they were all like, whoa, where is this coming? What? What? That's not how it happened. It's not an overnight thing. It's a gradual thing is what I'm trying to say. It builds. And with the Holocaust, before the Holocaust, in the previous 20, 30 years before the Holocaust happened, they were teaching that Jews were dirty, they were filthy, they were subhuman, they were the problem with society. Germany just would be so much better without the Jews. Those kind of things. So there was a lot of hatred that was building for the Jews for a long time before they actually were taken to the death camps. And when I see articles like this, it makes me think about those kinds of things. It makes me think about how the persecution of the Jews was a gradual thing that built up and eventually culminated in their extermination, almost extermination. So in this article, the whole thing is just talking about just how awful Christians are, white American Christians, how awful we are, how uneducated we are, how racist we are, how bigoted we are, and he ultimately says in the end that we are the problem with society. He says, let's see, avoiding the obvious only prolongs getting the necessary treatment. America has always had a race problem. The country was built on racism and bigotry, he says. And he says, here are the honest truths that rural Christian white Americans don't want to accept. Unless they accept these truths, nothing is going to change. So basically he's saying we've got to change our belief systems, kind of like Hillary Clinton said. She said we need to change our belief systems. And that's what this guy is saying too. And he goes into a lot of things that he says we are ridiculous for believing. Let's see. Get to the bottom here. He says, I understand their fears are based on myths and lies. I understand they feel left behind by a world they don't understand and don't really care to understand. They are the problem with progress and always will be because their belief systems are constructed against it. The problem isn't a lack of understanding by coastal elites. The problem is a lack of understanding of why rural Christian white America believes, votes, behaves the way it does by rural Christian white America. So he's saying we are the problem with society. And